Hi, I'm gonna talk to you guys about the conflict surrounding designating the Yaak Valley, which is in northeastern Montana, spills into a little bit into Idaho and a little bit into Canada. Super remote little valley, has about 200 year time or year-long residents in it. So there were essentially two conflicts. The first one was resolved. There was a conflict about creating a bill, and there was a lot of pushback from local residents about designating a lot of the last roadless interior of the valley as wilderness, because they were concerned they weren't going to be able to snowmobile in the areas that they could currently, and they were concerned they weren't going to be able to ride ATVs, and they were also concerned that they were going to lose their jobs. A lot of them work in the timber industry. So those were the concerns. However, this bill that was proposed, the Forest Jobs and Recreation Act, solved those conflicts by designating certain user groups in user areas so that they could segregate these areas to avoid conflict between user groups. This Forest Jobs and Recreation Act also require the U.S. Forest Service to do restoration harvest, which means thinning, select cuts, stuff like that, removing roads, which would employ the current people that were working in the timber industry. So jobs weren't going to be lost and people were still going to be able to recreate. However, when this bill got to vote on for the first time in 2009, it was supported by about 70% of Montanans, and it was vetoed by Congressman Steve Daines. And then it was amended about 20 times and was voted on again in 2013. Similar results. Steve Daines once again did not support the bill because he wanted the support for his own bill. So there's these things called wilderness study areas, and there's about 44 of them in Montana. There's quite a few in the Yaak Valley. There's pristine areas of wilderness. And there's been a move to reduce or change the name of these areas so that they can be used for other things, like recreation and such. And this Forest Jobs and Recreations Act would abolish about 12. And Steve Daines falsely claimed that his act, which I'm not sure the name of, would abolish about 29. However, that wasn't true. And Steve Daines' bill was only supported by about 11% of Montanans, probably due to the fact that he held a grand total of 0 public meetings to discuss the bill. So you've got people, and to this day, the bill still hasn't been published, or hasn't been passed. So you've got people that are trying to designate this area as wilderness. They got pushback from the local residents, resolved that conflict with local residents, and then the bill stalled and never got passed in Senate. So that was the conflict. It happened, there's been a movement to protect the valley from mid-90s. But as far as personal connection goes, I was kicking around home back in the Bay and ran into this book in my library. I was looking for something to read. This is called The Book of Yaak by Rick Bass. And I was like, oh, that looks like a pretty good book. Cool cover. I popped it open, and there's a note in here, a little memo from my late grandmother. It says, "Hope you enjoy this book. I've heard good reviews about it." And I'd been missing her at the time, so I pretty voraciously read this. And I think it's just a very cool mix between kind of technical, dense reading and enjoyable, just for fun reading. And it's cool to learn about the process and the difficulties locally around supporting such an act.